Dr. Lupovitch, how important was conversion to Judaism in the Jewish diaspora?
Important is an interesting choice of words. I think.
I guess I meant
Oh,
important to growth of the population.
I think the growth of the Jewish population was mostly through biological growth.
Oh,
So Jews were never really counting on converts or new members to grow.
okay.
They were counting on two things. They were counting on having children, and they were counting on retaining the children and the people they had. So those were their main concerns. In fact, after a certain point, I mean, conversion to Judaism was always possible, but after a certain point, the difficulty of converting to Judaism increased. So in traditional Judaism, if a person wants to convert to Judaism, they're going to be refused three times before they're allowed to convert. And this, I don't mean pro forma. If you go and you want to convert to Judaism, you ask a rabbi or someone, the answer is going to be no. And the reason for that, and like I said, this is not just pro forma. The reason for that is Jews don't want converts unless they really mean it. They don't want half converts. Only want people who
Makes
are
sense.
who are with real conviction and real sincerity, and they don't want people converting to Judaism for the wrong reason. So, for example, I don't know if this is an urban myth or a real story, in that there was an individual who wanted to convert to Judaism because he bought into the conspiracy theory about Jewish power. I heard Jews control everything, so I want in on that. So I want to become Jewish. Now, I don't know if that's a real story, but it illustrates the point. That person was turned away. If you want to become Jewish, you have to demonstrate that you really believe in the ideas and values of Judaism. Now, once you do that, then there is a process you can go through, although that process is also very rigorous. You can't become Jewish overnight. The first thing you have to do is to study for an extended period of time. And once the person working with you is convinced or is satisfied that you have a thorough enough knowledge of Judaism, then you can go through the actual ritual of conversion.
This is interesting because in some ways, the way you're explaining it, this rigorous process and this true desire to become Jewish, in some ways, some of these converts may actually know the Jewish religion and culture more than some people that are born Jewish, right?
Absolutely. Converts to Judaism, I would say that's not just sometimes, I would say oftentimes converts to Judaism are more knowledgeable about Judaism and more active and committed to Judaism than many Jews who are born Jewish, who just for them it's just sort of secondary, who may do nothing, who may be indifferent. Indifference is not an option for a convert.
Yeah. Um, did a lot of significant incidents of conversion to Judaism occur in history? We talked about one of them, the kingdom of Khazars.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say it was more. First of all, we don't have a lot of records about it, but I mean, there were when it would happen, especially if it was a public figure, it could be almost scandalous.
Oh,
In the Middle
wow.
Ages,
Yeah.
uh, in medieval France or maybe Spain, in the eighth or ninth century, there was a Christian clergyman whose name was we simply know him. His name was Bodo. He converted to Judaism. He became known as Eliezer. And the Bodo Eliezer affair was a real scandal in the church. This was the point where the church, especially in France, began to lobby to have greater separation between Jews and Christians
Oh,
because they were
wow.
concerned that Christians were being attracted to Judaism. Um, I'll give you another example. In the 13th century, the Mendicant friars, meaning the Franciscans
Hmm,
and
hmm.
the Dominicans, they were concerned mainly with a decline in Christian piety in Christian Europe. But one of the things they attributed that decline in Christian piety to was too much interaction between Christians and Jews. So it wasn't necessarily Christians converting to Judaism, but it was Christians being distracted by Jews or being attracted to ideas other than ideas that are Christian. So there are always people converting to Judaism. We don't know how many. I don't think it was ever really that many. There was
Yeah.
never a massive, other than the Khazars, I suppose, there was never a massive wave of converts to Judaism.
I see. So it wasn't a significant development in the history of Jewish diaspora. Um, In narrating Jewish history in the nation's kingdoms and empires, um, in which they lived during the diaspora, we often come across the term, especially in scholarship, host country, right?
Mhm.
But for the Jewish people that lived there, for example, in Spain, you said 700 years. The term host has sort of a temporary connotation to it, but for them, this was life. This was permanence itself. So how did they view or their host country? And I'm wondering, what term did they use?
That's a great question. I would say in especially in longer diaspora experiences like Spain and Poland, Jews really had a sense of rootedness and being at home in these countries. Now there was this belief, there was a core Jewish belief that at some point in the distant future, at the end of time, far in the future, the Messiah of the Jews would arrive and lead the Jews back to the land of Israel. But that wasn't an immediate concern. Most Jews who lived in the diaspora felt very much at home where they were, and they believed that that's where they were going to stay, and that was their experience, because you'd have multi-generations of a
Yeah.
Jewish family who not only lived in the same country, but would live in the same town or the same village for multiple generations. And so there was a real sense is this is where we've been, and this is where we're going to be forever, or at least till the end of time. So they had a deep connection to where they were living.
Okay, so they didn't use the term host or anything like that. That's modern
Uh,
scholarship that refers back to those times.
yeah, but I mean, they didn't use the term specifically, but they did have a sense that this was their home. I mean, I'll
Okay.
give you an example. Different Jewish communities, they'll create sort of an origin story. So Jews who lived in Poland, this is their origin story of why Poland is called Poland. Okay. The Hebrew, basically, it's a story about about a group of Jews who are wandering around looking for a place to live. Now, the Hebrew word for Poland is Polin. And if you break that into syllables, the Hebrew phrase Polin means let us dwell here. And
Oh,
so it's
wow.
so Pauline had the connotation of this is the place where Jews live. This is where we are. This is where we
This is
belong. And in fact, it's
fascinating.
remarkable. I mentioned earlier Jews in Poland suffered that setback in 1648, that massacre by the Ukrainian Cossacks. In 1648, there were some Jews who thought Jewish life in Poland was over. In fact, there was a Polish Jew whose name was Nathan of Hanover, who wrote a eulogy for Polish Jewry called The Abyss of Despair, but it was premature because there were almost 300 more years
Years.
of Jewish life in Poland. That's a long history. And even though the Polish Jewry had a tragic end during the Holocaust,
Yeah.
before that, this is a remarkable diaspora experience where Polish Jews were able to do and create in a lot of different ways. This was a place where Jews lived comfortably, or at least in a stable situation, for a very long time. And they saw the Polish kings or the Polish nobles as their benefactors and as their protectors.
In here we're talking about Polish Jews, and I appreciate what happened in 1648. And correct me if I'm wrong here. I thought what happened in 1648 was on the Ukrainian side of the Polish-Lithuanian Empire, but the way you're describing it now, it seems like the 1648 massacre was throughout
No, no,
the
I'm sorry.
country.
It was just in the Ukrainian
Yeah.
southeast
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the notion was that destruction was going to have a seismic effect. It was really the beginning of the end
Oh, I
of
see.
Jews
I
being
see.
able to live anywhere in Poland, even though it just started in Ukraine, because it was followed by a series of wars and a destabilizing situation. But the fact of the matter is, it was a temporary setback. And, Jewish life in Poland and even in Ukraine went on all the way into the 20th century.
Yeah. Let's take a break here. Stay with me and Dr. Lopovitch as we get into the perspective.